All right. Want to thank everybody for joining us for our State of Influencer Marketing 2025 webinar. We're just now getting kicked off. Myself and Gordon are here. See people are joining the stream on either YouTube or LinkedIn. Thank you for coming. It's Friday. Hopefully this is making your Friday afternoon a little bit easier if you're on this side of the world, or if you're on Gordon's side of the world, maybe you've got a glass of Pinot Grigio or Chardonnay with you, your family dinner, you're watching the webinar. So we're going to give folks about a minute to join us, and then we'll dive in. While we're waiting, just a reminder to everybody, we've pulled together this report. We pull it together every year just from the data that we collect at HypeAuditor, and then we speak with agencies and brands to try to get their perspective, and as well as influencers, just try to understand what's shaping the data that we're seeing. And so if you're looking for the full report, we can drop it in a link in the comments, so you can go get that full report. You can dive into some of the changes that are happening in countries and in categories. I'll go ahead and pull that over, and then we'll get kicked off here in a second while folks are joining us. But I want to thank everybody again for spending some of their Friday here with Gordon and I. We enjoy doing this whenever we get the chance, just to kind of reflect and then recklessly speculate on what we think is going to happen next. Well, it's been about a minute. So Gordon, we'll go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody again for joining our webinar today. Just jump to the next slide for introductions. Gordon, of course, I'll let you say hello, but I want to give you a proper introduction. So if you don't know, Gordon Glenister is sort of a world-renowned expert in influencer marketing and community and membership growth. He's written a couple of great books, and always really enjoy hearing his perspective on the state of influencer marketing. And me being stateside, I think it's also really cool to get that international perspective, because things are so different globally. And Gordon, you get to talk to lots of people. So I'll let you say hello, call out any of your fans that are here maybe, or people that you know are watching right now, or whatever. But I'll pass it over to you for introduction.
Oh, well, lovely. I'm really pleased to be here, and thank you, Ryan. I do enjoy these conversations, and I think there's some fabulous insights that you've pulled together. For those of you that don't know who I am the host of the Influence Global podcast. We're now 160 episodes in, which has been quite a journey. So if you want to listen to any of our podcasts, do so on Spotify or on any of the other sort of shows. And you're right, I'm also the author of Influencer Marketing Strategy and the founder of Influence, which is the division of the Branded Content Marketing Association.
Cool. Awesome. There's lots of expertise. I will say the collective we that we have, but I know most of it is you carrying my dead weight here. But we'll go ahead and get started. I like to put into perspective, a lot of times we do these webinars at HypeAuditor. We're a global company. People are all over the world. Most of the time, our registration from people on the US or Canada is maybe around a third of people attending this webinar. And I thought it'd be cool to show the distribution of Gordon and I. About 6,000 kilometers away. I think it's 5 hours time difference. And I'm sure, and love to hear from some of the folks that are joining now, where in the world that you're joining from. It's always cool to see people from Asia Pacific regions, from Europe, even from Africa we've seen, and of course stateside, or Latin and South America. So add it to the chat. It's always cool just to see where people are coming from. But we're doing this live from the other sides of the world, which I think is really, really cool. In terms of topics, like here's our agenda for today. We want to dive into some of the trends, some of the stats, and that type of thing you can see in the white paper that I shared. So we're not going to dive a ton into like individual country stats, because you can glean that. We really wanted to dive into some of the perspective and takeaways that we're seeing. So we're going to talk about some of the stats, some of what's changing in the market and what's driving that change, and then some of those essential trends. Gordon and I work together on, like, what are the things that we think are really impacting marketers, whether you're at an agency or you're at a brand or you're a founder wearing 10 hats and you want to lean into influencer? Like, what are the things that are going to impact the results you see almost regardless of the size that you are as a business or the maturity of your campaign? So that's where we want to spend the bulk of our conversation. But we're going to start off with some key stats. We'll be adding some color commentary as we go through. Before I do, it's awesome. We've got somebody here from India joining us almost the middle of the night. So that's awesome to see. Los Angeles, California. We got Nigeria. So very, very distributed group, which I think is just awesome. And feel free in the chat to add questions or comments or perspectives that you have if we miss anything, or if you're just curious, you want to drill into something. We'll have an open Q&A at the end as well that we'll touch on as much as we can. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. Somebody from Virginia. I'm in North Carolina right now, so Virginia is not too far from me. So let's just start with how the market is evolving. This is a very, very high level picture of the influencer marketing space. And I'd love to get your perspective on it, Gordon. But one thing I want to underline that I think is really impactful is 2024 was the year of like tightening belts. Marketing budgets are shrinking. It's all about efficiency. But then in influencer, you see growth. And we're going to touch on it a little bit later, like what is driving that growth? Because I think that there's very tangible reasons, but I think it's that we're seeing that evolution of this does drive performance, even if its primary objective isn't really immediate performance. The fact that people are taking their shrinking budgets and putting more into influencer is showing that they're getting value for their brand, whether that's sales or awareness. We know it's a combination of both, but we're seeing that play out when, in all honesty, I would have expected to see things maybe remain flat because it was just a year of most marketers not loving coming out of their budget meeting. But I'm curious of what your take is, Gordon, folks that you've spoken to as well, just that top level view of how people are thinking about this channel.
Well, I think in many ways, I remember the recession of 2008 or so when we had the big crash. You know, they often say the best time to market is in challenging times, because when some of your competitors are pulling back spend, this is a great time to grab market share.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about influencer marketing is it has a phenomenal return on investment when done well. You know, we've got the right influencers, the right campaign strategy, the right goals in place. I also think that other media is suffering. You know, print media, TV, radio, it's not delivering the results as it once did. So actually, from a value perspective, you know, influencer marketing is a great medium, not just for big brands, but I'm excited to see lots of small to medium-sized brands really launch themselves through influencer marketing and get real sizable returns, which I think is really exciting. You talk about 31 billion in 2027. I've seen stats which suggest by 2030 this industry could be topping 100 billion.
Yeah.
So that sort of trajectory just shares this sense of this is a sector that people want to be investing in. I would say it's become a lot more competitive now. There are a lot more agencies and platforms offering it, and there's a lot more influencers now offering their services. So and we're going to talk about AI a bit later on. So I think it's wise to make sure that you're working with the right agency that understands the data, understands the stats, and can deliver the returns that you're looking for.
Yeah, it definitely feels like we're at that, 2006, it was, what is this paid search marketing? Seems like a fad, obviously not. And then it was, what is this paid social advertising on Facebook? Seems like a fad, obviously not. And so, you hear people say, oh, influencers, this is that same, we're just at the beginning of this huge swell that's going to become so critical for brands. It's not something that's just going to die away. And it weathers, as we've seen with TikTok, it weathers changes in the landscape of like what channels are people using as well.
Well, also just to finish, I think as marketeers become under much more pressure within the finance departments to deliver results, that's why I think anything that's driven around performance marketing will make a difference.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to dive into more of this in some of our future slides, but just at a high level, like what's driving this growth when people's budgets are shrinking. Uh, these platforms are investing on making it easier for you to buy directly on the platforms, which if advertisers are seeing a return, they're going to pour more money on, right? So that's one of the things that we're seeing. There's this democratization, like it's easier for small companies to find tools, solutions, use different AI powered solutions to get where they want to go, which before maybe required a bigger team, a bigger investment. We're seeing all of that sort of come down, which is inviting more people into the market, more investment into the market. Obviously, more innovations when it comes to tech, driving efficiencies, making sure that people are getting the most from campaigns, the visibility into that performance that they're seeing. What is the value that they're getting? How can they build models around these partnerships? And then we're seeing it a lot in the regions that I mostly work with as well, with Latin America really seeing this boom. These markets that I would say are almost a little bit more born into mobile with influencer being this key component. Places like Brazil, places in Asia Pacific regions versus in the US, where there's a little bit slower of this adoption, where it's more ingrained. We're seeing that those markets are really investing more heavily. So you've got a much more huge concentration of people leaning into this. So there's this global surge. It's not isolated to just one place or another.
Absolutely. But I mean, just to add to what you just said there, Brazil is a phenomenal place. I made a documentary film on influencer marketing in Brazil. And if you've got 1 million followers on YouTube, you're just like an average influencer. They worship their influencers over there on another level. And I think I've also seen a stat that suggests that in Brazil, it has the highest conversion of influencers to product than anywhere else in the world.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to know. I mean, it's great for brands to understand like what is the interaction that these users are going to have. What is that familiarity? Because usually it's that familiarity with the process and like what is happening here that will dictate conversion. If it's a little bit out of the norm, I'm not sure what I'm looking at. That's where you see got to invest. You got to take some time. But if people are adaptable, right? That's when you can see a lot of more immediate value. And that's not saying that this is supposed to be an immediate value channel. It's just that it can exist though, which is valuable for a lot of small businesses that can't pour $50,000 a month into influencer and wait for results, right? Like you kind of need to see some cash flow return. So real quick, we're going to touch on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube before we dive into those 3 or 4 main areas of impact on what you're going to see day to day. We'll kind of allude to them as we talk about these channels, but save a lot of your questions or if you have questions that come up, we might answer them as we go a little bit deeper into our presentation. We're going to start with Instagram because Instagram still remains the king when it comes to brands investment, especially in the regions that we have in our report, but just in terms of the overall desire to push further with their presence, not just an influencer, but also just being much more active with social, trying to treat this as a channel almost like email marketing to nurture their audience. 90% of the brands that we surveyed plan to increase that presence across the board because they see the value, and you have other variables at play, like what's going to happen with TikTok as a channel. For me, I'm going to go deeper on this channel, right? So we're seeing that as a big percentage of people are going to be leaning here more heavily. And I think if we were to look at the last percentage, it's really awesome to see that a huge chunk of users take action after encountering product information on Instagram. So there's value in why we're showing these videos where we're interacting with product, we're trying it on, we're showing what it looks like, we're showing how big it is. People use this as a research tool, similar to how we see it on YouTube, and that heavily influences purchases. And if you've got something that's more of a considered purchase, that's something that's more expensive, it's only more important to show it in real life. How does somebody interact with it? Because it's such a consideration for them. They want to be confident in what they're doing. So those are some things that I thought were really, really interesting. I don't know, Gordon, is there anything that you would take away from the site or anything that you would add or we didn't touch on?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing to see those sort of stats. It really does. I mean, I always think Instagram is the home of influencer marketing, to be honest. It's also worth noticing where the Instagram algorithm is looking at. It's looking a lot more at average views. And I know whenever I've run an influencer campaign, I'm more interested in engagement rate and average views necessary than follower numbers. And what those creators that do a really good job on the platforms and are rewarded in a way are those people that modify the type of content that they create. So it'll be videos, it'll be carousels, it'll be statics, it'll be lives. It's a whole, ultimately it's understanding what the algorithm wants is to keep its users on the platform. And the only way you're going to do that is to create inspiring, educational, entertaining content.
Yeah, variety is the spice of life. Isn't that the sort of
Indeed.
saying? I think that's a great segue. Like there's six big things that we noted here that have changed on Instagram, but like the first one is Instagram when it comes to how they're using their algorithm and the analytics. Okay, they've shifted to much more of this prioritization on engagement and views, which I think if you're a savvy marketer, you sort of know this, but if you're dabbling in influencer marketing, you're trying to push, even if you're a bigger brand and this is your first push, you get attracted to these big numbers of followers. And it's much more important to look at, are the people that are following this person real people in the country that I can ship to and they're actively engaged? Because that at the end of the day is really what's going to shape the overall engagement and the value that they're seeing, not just chasing a big number of followers. So I think that's a really, really critical point. And then the other thing I highlighted, and Gordon, I want to hand it to you as well to call anything out. But one of the things we hear at HypeAuditor all the time is I reach out to influencers and I don't hear anything. It's like I'm sending it into the ether. And I think Instagram introducing more advanced messaging filters for influencers to see potential brand collaboration, potential whatever it might be, it's going to make that visibility for a smaller advertiser a little bit better to attract that attention. So there is some value if you're not doing email, if you're shifting to just sending DMs. You still have to have a compelling product. You still have to have a compelling offer. There still has to be really good alignment with that influencer's audience. But I think that that's something that is going to impact brands for the positive. They should see some benefit here for these brand partnerships as Instagram is doing that. So those are the two things that I sort of not quite a rectangle, like a little rounded off rectangle, but anything else that you would add, Gordon? I know that we had talked a little bit about AI before, but there's other things that have been happening on Instagram that have been really shaping.
Yeah, no, fascinating. And I think if you think about what Instagram is trying to do is to make sure that that they want to reduce fake profiles. They want their users to have an engaging experience. And that's why there's been a huge growth on, verification, which makes brands know that they're potentially working with a professional creator. But you're absolutely right. A lot of the time, creators get bombarded with messages. And actually, what people are probably unaware of is how much rubbish they can get within there that are, and in some cases, unsavory messages as well. And they've actually got to manage that. I mean, particularly some of the big creators, they may be having 100, 200 DMs to manage. So it's potentially a challenge for them to find, the one that really does stand out. And I always say to brands, if you want to work with a creator, do this jab, jab, punch approach, which effectively is like, comment, and then reach out. Show that the creator that you're genuinely interested in working with them, rather than sending them a send it to all type of email. Would you like to promote my product or service? They've worked hard at building an audience. Treat them with respect that they deserve.
Yeah. And we would add too, is you can send direct messages, but also send an email. Like your goal is just getting attention.
Of course.
Right. It's very noisy. Get some attention. Think multi-channel. If it's engaging with their content, then sending a DM, then also trying to find an email. right? Just you want to get in front of them if it's a compelling opportunity.
Yep.
So we're going to shift to TikTok. Key trends and changes that we've seen here. Such a massive platform, continuing to grow, though that growth is maybe paused since the 19th, as it's been removed from app stores in the US, but continuing to grow globally. A huge chunk of their base is that younger audience that brands are always trying to attract, and it's going to remain this place for that younger audience to grow your brand awareness and sort of brand loyalty. But it doesn't mean it's easy. There's lots of influencers that are building their own brands and identities, selling their own products on that platform as well. So it's very, very competitive, but there is this highly engaged younger audience on the platform all of the time, which I think is hugely impactful, something to think about. And then the other side of it is they've done a great job with TikTok Shop and driving sales and revenue. Just the sheer number of sales that they drove on Black Friday alone shows that they have this as a priority. They see we need to figure out how brands can really monetize this engagement, because otherwise they're not going to want to spend a whole lot of time and money here. And so seeing that 58% of their users are buying on the platform globally, more than 1 billion people. It's an incredible number.
It absolutely is. And I think TikTok Shop is a phenomenal success story. And I don't mean this just for influencers. I mean, everyday folks are now using TikTok as a highly valued side hustle. And what I've also been fascinated to see is how much investment TikTok is putting into sponsorship of sports and entertainment related events, which you don't necessarily get to see, for example, with Instagram or indeed Facebook. When you start to see, TikTok sponsoring football, sponsoring cricket, sponsoring the BAFTAs. I don't know if they're involved in the Oscars as well, but certainly they're in lots and lots of places. So their brand activations is quite considerable. They are, and I think they were on this massive growth until this situation that happened just recently about the TikTok ban. I mean, it's been a PR disaster for them. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But nevertheless, I think the other thing I'm fascinated to see is how you can sort of blow up very quickly on TikTok. The way in which their algorithm works is different to that of Instagram, and I think that really is great for emerging and smaller brands and individuals. You can literally find people that are really successful, and I can see how successful it is for people under the age of 24. But actually, I'm on TikTok. I have my own video content. I think actually there's a strong place for an older generation to stand out, because they haven't got there's a friend of mine actually that runs cream cakes, English cream tea Jane. She has a phenomenal audience on her cream teas, and she's in her mid-60s, but ironically it's an American audience that just love her content because of her English quintessential accent.
that we do, though. I'm gonna have to check with Nick on my end. I'm pretty sure, Gordon, we had you in this meeting because we thought you were in that 24-year-old demographic. So
yeah, obviously,
let's figure out what happened here. There's no surprise. We're going to get more into, like, I know that the TikTok ban, unban, reban, kind of ban in the US feels like an isolated thing, but there's potential domino effects of, like, well, what happens if the sale goes through, that type of thing. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, but there's been lots of other changes. The platform, the cool thing I think about TikTok is that they aren't resting on their laurels. I think that they understand you can't be a flash in the pan, right? Snapchat is, of course, still a very big business, but there's a flash in the pan, huge growth, and now it's much more stagnant. There's a very loyal base, and there's lots of value to be had there, but they're trying to innovate and recognize, hey, Meta's done it really well. Meta really prioritized driving value for brands and continuing to drive engagement for their user base. And so they continue to add new things that make it easier for creators, make it easier for brands, make it easier to see value. And that's what I think continues that sort of propellant for them, is that they're trying to keep on chasing, even though they could easily say, oh, well, we're growing so much faster, we'll pass Instagram any day. No, we're going to pretend that we're in 5th place and keep on pushing hard, which I think is going to benefit everybody, because they're going to continue to make everything better and easier, and more likely to drive more direct value. Anything else beyond, I mean, obviously I've got the red band there, but other things that you've seen or speaking with advertisers or marketers, Gordon, that you wanted to add?
No, only, I mean, we'll talk about it in a second, but the sheer amount of advertising spend on TikTok is huge. So where's that money going to go to? It's, and already when this ban was announced, one of the concerns was amongst, you don't realize what you've got until it isn't there. And I think, there's a lot of creators even just didn't believe this ban was going to be upheld. They just believed it was, rhetoric, politics, and I think there's probably an element of politics in it as well. But I think it was a bit of a shock to their system to think, oh my goodness, my entire business is on that platform. My entire audience. What happens if? And you suddenly realize how exposed you are with some of these with this. So and I think it also makes the point about you can't just rely on one platform in isolation.
Yeah, you got to diversify. If you're a brand, if you're a creator, like, you're seeing the value, like, I've got to be in other places, which we've seen increase across the board. So the last one we're going to talk about is YouTube, and it feels weird, right? Because YouTube has been around so long that's like, oh, it's just this other platform. It's not just this other platform. YouTube continues to be humongous. And I think the big stat that really blows me away is 63% of their active users are 18 to 34. So when you're talking about, oh, reaching younger people, that's TikTok. Google has figured out a really good way to keep all generations continuing to use this platform. And we know that they're really good at advertising and monetization strategies. We know that they can invest in these areas and that they really do prioritize that. And so YouTube continues to be this thing that there's a huge young audience. Of course, there's an established older demographic that might have more purchasing power, but it's this place that it's almost underrated. I don't know if you would consider that, Gordon, but it feels like, oh, it's just been there so long. Who cares about YouTube? It's like, you should. And a lot of the marketers that we speak to see it as an essential piece, not just from an influencer and like these longer form integrations, but also people are looking up our products and we need them to be able to see this stuff in a YouTube short, or they need to be able to come across our brand and get information about what we're trying to do as a brand. In long form video, this is still YouTube. We still need to be actively doing this. And so we're seeing that from the audience as well. But it's just funny. It's like they've been here for 20 years on these sites.
I know. It's insane, isn't it? I mean, I always call it the mothership in a way, because it's sort of led the way for so long. And when you consider, you've got some influencers that do YouTube tutorials and can keep the attention for 45 minutes. It's the ultimate encyclopedia of information. A lot of, I remember when we had the COVID, one of the biggest problems is that a lot of young people don't watch TV. They just don't. They don't watch mainstream news. They find a lot of their news and content through social media. So, during COVID, the UK government actually invested in influencers to get them to wash their hands properly. And it was a great success. But the reason I make reference to that is because YouTube now is, I watch YouTube more now than I have ever watched in my life. And the reason I do that is because I've got a bit of an aversion to news. And I actually find that there's some amazing content and documentaries and films and concerts that I can watch in my living room. Yeah. And I don't know whatever I don't think we've got stats between, what type of devices people are watching it on, but I think with the amount of smart TVs now, my mum will watch some of the grandchildren going around the world on YouTube, she'll see something. So although we see a big percentage, I wouldn't be surprised if there's still a huge audience there of an older demographic that are still rediscovering YouTube and realizing what amazing content that platform has.
Yeah, and the other sort of thing that a lot of people forget, and I'm a Pixel user, I'm not an Apple device user, so I don't forget this, but Apple device users do. There's billions of Android devices, and that's the same company. The avenues that they have to serve YouTube and videos in your feed directly, it's just they have such a distribution power. They're not really required for you to just go to the one app.
And also what I love about YouTube content is a lot of it evergreen. So you're discovering. I mean, I was watching a concert the other day from 20 years ago, and it's still appealing now. And obviously, there's ads being served as part of that as well. So it's a great vehicle. One thing as well, which has been a growth, is podcasts now on YouTube, and that's been a big surge as well as more and more brands consider advertising through podcasts, and YouTube is a vehicle for that to happen.
I mean, people love to watch two people drone on about things, as evidenced by the people in this webinar watching us talk. All right, so a couple of things have changed. I think Google's always going to lean into brands, but more shopping features in YouTube Shorts, and the continuation of that growth is going to be huge for immediate value for brands. YouTube is trying to push smaller influencers more to the front, people with smaller channels, similar to how you mentioned, Gordon. It's much easier to see a spike on TikTok. I think YouTube is seeing, we want to attract more creators. We need to incentivize this so that they don't get stuck in this kind of sort of valley of I'm a new influencer, but I'm not huge, right? And so they're trying to prop that up, which I think also will help brands because it will attract more creators as well as grow those existing creators, which means brands will see more value. So definite investments happening there. I don't know if you have anything else that you would add to this slide before we jump into our key trends.
I think the other thing is we've seen more creators create communities and membership and courses, and that sort of was sparked through the pandemic, actually, when a lot of brand advertising sort of was turned off. Creators had to find other ways to monetize their content. Yeah. So we've seen a big growth and spike in the monetizing, even if it's £5 a month or £10 a month or something, but certainly on the back of that's been a big shift.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are our stats, as it were. And if you scroll to the top of the comments, we've got a link to our report. We can see more of a breakdown globally, and then we'll actually release our State of Influencer Marketing report on different regions as well, trying to break down changes in categories and influencers within specific regions. So stay tuned for that to come if you're really focused in the UK or if you're really focused in Europe or Latin America. Now we're going to shift gears. This is going to be a bit more of our conversation, I think, about what's really impacting marketers. And all of this we've sort of alluded to, but we're going to spend a little bit more time on it. And I want to invite folks, if you've got questions or thoughts or comments as well, please feel free to pass them along. We'll do an open Q&A at the end. And we've seen people join these webinars, ask questions of other audience members. What are they seeing? Which I think is a huge benefit for just sharing that information, that value and perspective. But the first thing we're going to dive into in terms of what's going to impact marketers, and obviously the TikTok ban is something that is predominantly US. I mean, a lot of countries have banned TikTok on official government devices and things like that. But the full-on ban, this is a very much a US conversation. But we didn't feel like we could talk about the state of influencer market without talking about it, especially because the implications downstream for other countries potentially is huge. But forewarning to everybody, sort of reckless speculation will abound, because what is going to happen, I don't think really anybody has any idea. Just to catch everybody up, back in April, I believe it was, the law was signed about banning essentially TikTok. And then the ban was going to go into effect on January 19th. And it did. On the 20th, in the US, they inaugurated a new president, issued an executive order to prevent enforcement of the law for 75 days, which gets us to April-ish again. So a couple of things people need to remember if they're not in the US or need to know, or if you just you're just sick of hearing about it and so you've kind of tuned out. If you're in the US, you can still use the app, right? There was a day or two where they stopped being able to use the app. If you have the app on your phone, you could still use it. However, the app stores have not listed the app again because there's a little bit of an issue of liability, right? Because there's a law, even though it's been delayed. I can say with confidence, even though I don't know anybody at these companies, that Apple and Google, the lawyers have said it's probably not a good idea to list this app if it's against the law. Even
Do you
though
know
there's
what
a
it is? Do you know what the fine is? Do you know what the fine is,
No,
right?
I don't.
It's $5,000 per user.
Yeah. Yeah. So
That is
even though
humongous. That is humongous.
yeah, yeah, and even though the enforcement of it is supposed to be delayed, I think everybody's sensitive to, like, anything happens, you're going to be caught as distributing, right? So they're just not going to do it. So one thing that has happened is people on eBay are selling their phones with the TikTok app installed for $1,000 if you want to get a new
Really?
phone with the TikTok app.
God.
I don't know how many people are buying them, but that's the current scenario. So you can interact with it. You can't download it right now in the US. So just everybody on the same page there. So a couple of things, and maybe I'll hand it to you, Gordon, to kick off this side. But like, why does this matter globally? Like, in your perspective, obviously, like the US application is pretty obvious. But I'm curious too, like, what's your more global perspective, being in the UK, speaking with people all over Europe? Like, what's your perspective on how this impacts and why it matters to brands and agencies, as well as, I mean, it's obvious with creators, but I'm just curious of your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it was a bit of a shock to the system. I think most people believed that it wouldn't go the whole 9 yards. But I had a podcast interview about this, only not the last one, but the one before that. And we were talking about the TikTok ban and the implications. And I was curious to find out, well, why have the EU not banned it? And this is a lot about security. This is a lot about privacy, and I think because of its Chinese ownership, or I know the owner is Singapore and owned by ByteDance, and I think it just opens up a little bit of a we need to be understanding about, when you're running is that our data is secure and private, and that it's not going to be exposed. And that matters not only as individual users, but that also matters from brands' perspective. I mean, I also know that some TikTokers that were on the app were avidly saying, we don't care about our data. You probably know about us anyway. We just don't want our community tampered with. We want to be able to do what we do. I mean, I guess I'm quite fascinated to see, because the way that the law stands at the moment is that they have to looks like they have to sell it. And of course, there's been wild speculation about who those potential bidders might well be. And I'd love to use the chat for you to give your perspective on who those might be. I mean, there's been talk about Perplexity, the AI platform, Oracle, Microsoft, Mr. Beast, no less, Elon Musk, and Kevin O'Leary, otherwise known as the Shark Tank entrepreneur. But love to get your perspective on that as well. But yeah, I think this is all about security as much as anything else, and protection of privacy.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like a Kevin O'Leary acquisition, if you're a Shark Tank fan. I think he does the one in Canada as well. Is it Dragon's Den for you in the UK?
It's Dragon's Den, yeah.
He's legendary for like these licensing deals. So I don't see how he can do this. He's going to want like $1 back for every user. But
Yeah.
it'd be curious to see what kind of group can really make a go of it. And reckless speculation, welcome. If anybody's got a crazy theory of what will happen, for me, the fascinating thing is this like a first domino or not? Like, are people watching from the sidelines going, we're going to make a decision once we see how a decision has been come to, or is it's just a thing in the US and everybody else it remains sort of the same? I think that we've definitely seen creators think about diversifying. In talking with brands, a lot of brands have begun to treat this as kind of a nice to have platform, because they know, they're like, we can't really count on it. And so we're going to start shifting budgets around. Of course, there's flocking of people's money to other platforms, secondary platforms, right? That shift to, I think even TikTok was taking out ad space in their own app to push people to Red Note or one of their other tools or one of their other applications. But
Yeah.
definitely interesting to see what plays out. And the best part is that we'll have, almost 60 days to just sort of think about it.
Yeah, and I do wonder how much American politics have played within this as well, and whether or not there is, there is an impact around that. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I can see we've got somebody saying, Chinanza says that my money's on Elon Musk.
Yeah, I think that's probably the bet. I mean, somebody that can write down a $20 billion loss on the Twitter acquisition probably will be okay with writing down another loss on TikTok, because the one thing that's going to come from the sale in the US, at least, is the algorithm that is so powerful is not included, right? Like, so does it become a shell of itself?
Yeah, exactly.
So who's going to take that loss on the chin? Because I don't think TikTok is going to sell it or ByteDance is going to sell it at a discount. I just don't think there's really any incentive to do that.
That's really interesting perspective.
Yeah, we have a question, and I want to touch on this now before we move on to the next slide. But when it comes to Canada, Canada, I think it was last year, they closed offices for TikTok, but they still have the device. You can't use the device on government devices, but you can still use it. But there's like this weird, when they closed down the physical offices, why didn't they do anything else? And so I've spoken to some of the marketers in Canada. They're saying, I don't think anything else is going to happen. I think that they had their chance to do it. They didn't do it. So that's how it's going to be. And so there could be some really awesome opportunities up there. Similar type of market for the US. Could be a way to shift. But on the flip side, there's always been historically like a fast follow between the two countries of what you end up doing. I sort of end up doing the same type of thing. So it's really, as cliched as it is to say, it's like uncharted territory. Like it's not really something that because in the name of security, like sort of all bets are off what can happen. So I could see people shifting their budgets, but some of it's also gonna be tied to like, is the audience of those Canadian influencers the people I'm trying to reach? Can I ship to those people? Like there's more there than just visibility, right?
Absolutely.
People get that value. Okay, we'll change gears because I know everybody's been flooded with following hashtag TikTok ban on LinkedIn and everywhere else. So let's talk a little bit more around this sort of, it's not a new trend, but it's a surging trend. Like it feels like it's becoming more everywhere, where creators are becoming much more invested in creating their own brand of product, or much more direct partnerships with existing brands and the implications of that. So I'd love to get your thoughts here, Gordon, especially on how creators building their own brands shapes sort of the landscape when it comes to other marketers trying to partner with creators.
Well, I've been fascinated by this for a while, actually. I don't know if any of you have seen the Molly May documentary on Netflix, but certainly worth a look at an individual who was on a TV show. She was already an influencer, went on to a TV show, Love Island, and then actually became creative director for Pretty Little Thing. Flourished in that role, had a real insight for fashion, and particularly understanding her audience, her very female, younger women audience. And then, of course, went on to build her own brand, Maybe, which has done. She's worth about £8 million now, and she's in her mid-20s. But I think I've been fascinated to see that. It's not as easy as some would think. There's plenty of creators out there that are very good at creating content and building audiences. It's another set of skills in building an e-commerce brand and building a business. What I think works really, really well is when there are great partnerships with manufacturers and e-commerce specialists who actually have all of the supply chain managed, have all of the capabilities to build and grow a brand. What they don't have is an audience.
Yeah.
So matched together can work really well. I also think there's a great opportunity for a really successful creator to onboard a part-time e-commerce manager. So in other words, as part of their team, they have somebody that is effectively bringing their brand to market and managing the customer queries, managing the delivery, all of that process. Because from my own knowledge, a lot of creators come unstuck or don't really want to do that. And that's what I think. But when it works really, really well, then and look at the success of Kylie Jenner, for example, and her cosmetics range. Grace Beverly being another, and Bella Hadid, phenomenal success. But of course, they've all built teams around them. They know their own expertise. They've hired the right people that are experts in their own field. A lot of them have their own, not only their own online stores, but they'll have pop-up events. In the case of Molly May, when she launched it in London, she had like a queue like half a mile around the block. You know, it was phenomenal. And that creates its own publicity. It creates its own vibe as well. A little while ago, I was working with an agency and it was for an on-demand cookbook, actually. What was really interesting, Hewlett Packard had created a complete turnkey solution, actually, for creators to have their own cookbook. So all they had to do was upload up to 50 different recipes, and that whole platform would turn those recipes into a personalized cookbook, which they could then effectively sell. And Hewlett Packard took care of the entire process, the design, the shipment, because it was on demand print, and actually all the payments. And the influencer got a 25% cut of every book that was sold. All they had to do was effectively promote their own shop. And that was quite a smart way to promote a brand. But obviously, lots of other examples.
Yeah, I see Cat Crazy on YouTube is sort of doing the same thing. She's made a couple of comments now, building out a team. I think what influencers in the past have maybe underestimated, right, is they have this captive audience. They go, I'm going to launch a brand. And it makes it a little bit easier to go from 0 to 1. But if you have 1 million followers, depending on the product that you're selling, like when you begin to break it down conversion rate wise, lifetime value wise, it's like, oh, I can make a one-time thing, but building an actual business, I need, like, my starting audience is great. It's better than 0 for sure. It makes it a lot less painful, but you need 10, 20, 100-fold of the reach. And so by leaning into adding those experts, like, how can I really scale this out? I mean, you had mentioned Kylie Jenner's cosmetics brand, right? Like, it was at one point even $1 billion, but it's not now. But I think she's beginning to round out that understanding. Like, you can't just lean on just one thing. You've got to have distribution into other places. You have to
Absolutely.
have wholesalers. You have to have more than just my own e-commerce presence, my own website. I need to have a whole lot more, and that's a lot. It's a lot of
Well,
jobs.
and that's an
But
interesting point you made, because I know when we were looking for creators for their cookbooks, we had to have 100,000 minimum on
yeah,
the platforms that were following them, because not every follower is going to be a
yeah,
customer, of course. So there is, you do have to have that sense of scale. Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm pleased to say Kat as doing a great job there with her own brand. What's great about having a brand behind a creator is the creators are trusted by their community,
yeah,
because they've created, they've entertained, they've educated, they've inspired them. But that trust only goes so far, because I've also heard instances when supplies have been let down or
yeah,
product quality has been affected. So there are inherent risks in doing this process. So I think, that's where the creator's got to be straight on it, because effectively, like when you're a Richard Branson, you are the brand. When you're an Elon Musk, you are the brand. And in a way, that has strengths and weaknesses.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we've seen countless celebrities shift to focus on building their own product line, and then they stop doing movies. They shift to, I'm all building this business now, because it's so much more involved than just continuing to grow your Instagram following, right? Like there's just so many more moving pieces, and maybe they find that stuff more interesting. It's where we're coming up on time. There's a couple of things I think we want to make sure that we touch on that we think are really going to be impacting brands. And this one's sort of a twofer, shoppable content becoming easier and easier to just buy things, whether it's in a stream or it's on a post or in a video, whatever it may be. The number of tools and technologies from either platforms or third parties to make it easier to shop is a key point of explosion for why I think we continue to see influence marketing grow, even though generally marketing budgets were shrinking or flat last year. And there's a few reasons why. Obviously, when you're interacting with something in person, it's just much more real. It's not just a picture of a mug, like with a white screen, like me holding a mug. You get a sense of size, color, interaction, what I like and what I don't like. And then when you couple that with, and we have your credit card information saved on this social media network, and you just got to push a button and buy it, it becomes frictionless
Absolutely.
in
Yeah.
order to purchase. And guess what? In some cases, you don't even have to leave the video. So like some people will delay because they don't want to go somewhere. They want to keep in the moment. And the more that happens, where people can frictionlessly buy things that they're interacting with and stay in the same place, the better it's going to be for direct response. It's going to drive higher conversion rates. Now, can you sell a car by doing that? There's going to be some economies here where price points are still going to matter, research is still going to matter. But there's been a huge investment in this, even though Instagram dropped live shopping, right? Like you might think, oh, that's like the death of this. No, it's not. It's just they want to reprioritize. That tells me that they just haven't figured out how to make enough money at it. They've got other areas that they can focus on generating revenue, but the presence of this is still growing faster and faster, like TikTok Shop. There's lots of third-party tools for streaming broadcasts and showing products and making it easy to purchase. So I think that this is going to be another huge driver this year for e-commerce companies, for agencies working with e-commerce companies, to drive that more immediate value, see that more direct engagement with, here's the content. Are we seeing activity in terms of sales even, or to those product pages or whatever it might be? Not just, I did a post, let's see what comes through on the other end. What would you add to?
Lots. Alibaba and Amazon, for example, about 5 years ago, put out a call to hire 100,000 influencers for their platforms, because they really understood that they bring so much more to the to the sale process. And we, you know, many of us around the world have seen TV shopping and how clever they create interest. They demonstrate, they present the clothes or whatever the products are. It's features and benefits, and then of course they've got a limited time before those sale items are going to go, whatever. So they create urgency, and they do it really well. I mean, I'm super impressed, particularly with what Asia has done with live stream shopping. I mean, I almost think it's led the world for so many years. You actually even have in factories, you have creators all lined up, you know, doing these things and selling even basic things like toilet rolls at ridiculous prices, like super quick. And there's plenty of examples of creators that are making millions of dollars by doing this. And I really think it's a great opportunity for brands to do more live streaming. And it isn't just I'm going live for half an hour, but you know, I'm going live for 4 hours. I also think it's a fascinating way of showing more behind the scenes content and really getting a spotlight on the creator's life, so that the audience feel really connected, as you say, authenticity being at the core of it. So people are really fascinated. So of course, when that person comes to promote or sell a product, they're vested interest because they've already built trust with their community.
Yeah. And I would add, I mean, I know that most of the folks here are marketers. This is not something that is meant to become this burdensome production process. Like, it's meant to be, the impact is the fact that you're doing it live and being real. And so whether you're just a marketer on the team working with a third party to do something on your website for a flash sale, don't overthink it. Like, the value isn't just being there and presenting it and talking about it. It doesn't have to be this thing like I have to overthink it. It's going to be so much coordination. No, it's just, you just show up and produce the content, and you continue to do that, which is what you would think when you're trying to become a creator on Instagram or you're trying to be a creator on TikTok. You just do it and learn as you're going. That's what's required here, right? For the brand side of it, as well as obviously partnering with influencers, they're going to be a bit more savvy with it, but it's not this polished production. It's just about
and and also, Ryan, I like this sense that you've got your own personal shopper. You know, like, you know, let them just say, ladies, you know, ladies, this particular product looks this, I'm going out tonight, which you think I should wear, and accessorize it. You almost get the sense that somebody would buy the whole outfit because of the way in which they can see the use case study. I also like the fact that you've mentioned there reducing return rates. That's a phenomenal problem for a lot of retailers, online retailers as well. And where you've got somebody talking about and helping people with sizing and understanding that there are different perspectives there, I think is important.
Yeah, I mean, don't underestimate the cost of returns. I think the stat that I saw was something like 1 in 4 purchases that have free shipping and free returns, 1 in 4 are returned. That's a huge cost for small businesses, especially. Here's a random stat we pulled from Statista: 14% of all online purchases, all happen through social media.
That's phenomenal. That is
14% feels small. This is billions and billions of dollars. It's hugely impacted by people showing product, endorsing product, adding context to product, and it's not going away. So we talked about trends on platforms. We sort of touched on this. I sort of gave the commentary around, like, don't overthink it, right? Just think about, how am I communicating my brand to the world, and just doing that, and not just a static website. Just for time, I want to leave us on this last sort of topic. We had a couple of other notable takeaways, but maybe one was maybe we're underselling it a little bit, because you hear AI everywhere. But Gordon, I'd love you to sort of wrap us up, and we can open up for a quick Q&A. But your thoughts and what you've seen. I mean, we've seen the rollout of AI-powered resources for marketers, for influencers. I know that you guys, you were talking a little bit about a study beforehand. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that too. Like, how do people feel about this influx of technology shaping what they were doing before? And then we can wrap it up. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in. But Gordon, I'd love for you to bring us home on AI and influencer marketing, what's happening there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating area. In fact, I was actually running an AI hackathon only on Wednesday of this week. I still think we're in the proof of concept projects a lot of the time, and a lot of education and understanding about the real capabilities of what AI can do for businesses. When it comes to creators, we did a piece of research with you guys, which I'm sure if anybody's interested in seeing it, you can get a hold of it either through the BCMA or through HypeAuditor. But 82% of influencers are using AI at the moment, largely around products like ChatGPT and Midjourney, but they're also using tools to improve their workflow and process. There are some concerns about, using their what's the word now? Using their voice, using their brand identity as a digital twin. And obviously, when you consider you can mimic people's voices now and get people to say all sorts of different things. So I think there's always going to be a concern about that. So whilst I think AI is a great tool, we're talking about it being the fourth industrial revolution. I think there's also a degree of care that needs to be waged on when running campaigns. You've also got AI influencers now, and they've been around, CGI influencers for a while, producing some amazing results for brands, to be honest. So I think it's exciting. It's new. It's development. It's here, whether we like it or not. But just tread carefully. Understand the implications of data and privacy. But I think it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I think most of the attendees here would be surprised to hear that we are actually just AI and not here at all. I'm just kidding, of course. We are absolutely here. That's the end of our presentation. We'll follow up with this presentation. Again, you can download the full research that we did, our global state of influencer marketing for 2025. I sent along the link before, but just hypeauditor.com/resources. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Gordon, thank you again for allowing us to take some of your winding down time, 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock now. But I appreciate everybody for coming. Thank you for joining us. It's a very exciting year. There's so many changes happening. I'm looking forward to seeing what things we got right, what things we got wrong. Stay tuned for more webinars from HypeAuditor. I'm sure that we're going to have some sort of live update as we get closer to April with the imminent sort of TikTok situation here in the United States. But I want to thank everybody for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, evening, morning, whatever time it might be. And we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you.